forward to today's discussion on transforming and finding equity in knowledge management for the international development sector with Bridget Snell. The format for today's session is a 20 to 25-minute presentation and around 20 minutes for Q&A. Before we get started, I want to mention a few housekeeping items. Given that this is a hybrid event, we will be asking questions from both in-person and virtual audiences. I'll be walking around with the mic for in-person questions, and Christine will ask questions from the virtual audience. We are also recording today's session, but we will keep the camera on the speaker only, ensuring that only voices from the audience will be recorded. The video of this event will be available on the CID YouTube channel afterwards. We hope you'll join us November 18th at a normal time of 12 p.m. Eastern with Sonal Shah, Interim Executive Vice President at United Way Worldwide. But without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our speaker for today, Bridget Snell. With a career spanning over 20 years in international development, Bridget Snell is an international development leader in knowledge management and learning. Bridget is currently the Senior Managing Director of Collaboration and Knowledge at Save the Children USA. She taught monitoring, evaluation, and learning for over a decade at Brandeis and Tufts Universities and delivered curriculum on rights-based program design, monitoring, and evaluation, and leadership to international development practitioners across Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and Latin and North America. From 2004 to 2021, Bridget worked for Oxfam, where she played a significant role in defining the organization's standards for program design, monitoring, learning, and evaluation. Bridget is a co-author of Oxfam's leadership model, which connects international development leadership to feminist leadership principles and practice. Bridget was Oxfam's first global head of learning at Oxfam, and she designed and implemented the organization's first global shared service in learning and organizational development. Bridget seeks partnerships with others in the international development sector, academia, and technology to leapfrog efforts to share and make sense of knowledge about what works, what does not, and what ultimately matters to the children and families we serve. Thank you all for being here, and I will pass that on to Bridget.
Great, thank you. I think I'm good. Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to Fatima and Katie for the invite to be one of your speakers in the speaker series. How many people here have been to one of the SID or CID speaker series? I'm just curious. Yeah, okay, give me feedback and let me know how it went. All right, so thank you, Layla. That was it. It gives you an idea of I am super passionate about this topic of international, not just international development, but knowledge management in this sector. And it's something that I've been working on for most of that 20 years. And it was really enjoyable to do this exercise of a 20-minute talk, a little daunting on a subject matter called knowledge management and international development. So bear with me. But it was really enjoyable because I myself found myself back in time to moments where I have been part of this journey myself. And it was just really validating to the fact that, you know, we really have a lot of history of trying to do this. So let's use this space to figure out what's the future and our ambition and how we can do this better, because we're still not doing it well enough. So I'll start with that. So what are we talking about? What we're going to talk about is harnessing knowledge in the international development sector for the purpose of improving impact, but for CID students and for Harvard Kennedy School students, very importantly, harnessing knowledge to influence national and global policies and practice. That's why we're trying to harness our knowledge for influence and impact. What I'm not going to talk about, and this is where I want to put this was a little bit of a challenge in this 20-minute speech, because you can end up talking about a whole lot of things here. And I was even myself getting a bit confused about what am I actually talking about? Oh, I don't want to talk about knowledge management within organizations. Every organization over the last 20 to 30 years has been trying to wrestle with its own knowledge. Harvard is trying to wrestle with its own knowledge, right? The academic sector is wrestling with its own knowledge. Our organizations and nonprofit international NGOs are wrestling with this, and global institutions are. And I'm going to talk about business in the private sector. They have absolutely harnessed their organizational knowledge for profit, right? So they're in a lot of ways an actor to watch. But what I want to say is I don't want to talk about the vast literature on internal change to create a knowledge or learning organization. I want to talk about a critical challenge and the gap in the system, which is we don't have sector-wide, system-wide knowledge sharing. Good? All right. So I'm going to start with what we're talking about, because we're in, always, what is she talking about? What is knowledge? What is knowledge management? You have to do that. So what are we talking about? What are the actors and the efforts we should acknowledge and be aware of? Again, in a 20 to 30 year history, really, of a focus on knowledge management. What are the challenges and barriers we should be talking about? And again, I won't go deep because I would like us to talk about the challenges and barriers together. And then new approaches and ambitions. Okay, so what is knowledge? Knowledge is simply what someone knows. I know it sounds so ridiculous, but it is. It's what someone knows. It's not information. It's not data. It's literally what someone knows. And the way to think about knowledge, and this is a funny slide because even when I put the words on the slide, I laughed. It's sticky, people, explicit. This is a terrible slide, but it's a great way for you to remember the qualities of knowledge. Knowledge is always sticky. What does that mean? It means knowledge is directly associated with a person. You cannot separate knowledge from a person. And the credibility and the trustworthiness of that knowledge is all about the credibility and trustworthiness of the person who has generated that knowledge. Good? It's knowledge. Thirdly, there are two forms of knowledge that we can talk about. The explicit form of knowledge, which is what we are often working with as students and policymakers, which is documents, formal documents, videos, talks. These are what we call explicit knowledge. And there is a lot of explicit knowledge out there. But the majority of knowledge in our sector is actually tacit. Tacit knowledge is the knowledge that's in our head. It is not put on paper. It is not shared in a talk. It is not captured in a video. It's not captured in a drawing. It's just literally in our head. And if you think of explicit knowledge, I don't have a whiteboard, but if you think of explicit knowledge versus tacit knowledge, explicit knowledge is the tip of the iceberg of knowledge in the international development sector. And tacit knowledge is the giant iceberg underneath the water. And that's what we're trying to get at. So the point here is when we talk about knowledge and we talk about knowledge management, you cannot separate knowledge from people. Knowledge is people. And therefore, knowledge management is a people-centric practice. Again, what it's not is information management. What it is not is data management. It is not an engineering challenge. It is a human challenge. Okay, so then let's talk about knowledge management. So knowledge management, I'm going to say something provocative, but I think it's true, that actually you cannot manage knowledge. So it's like a misnomer. We shouldn't even be calling it knowledge management because knowledge is people and you can't manage the knowledge that's within a person. What we can do and what our practice is managing its flow. So when we want to achieve true knowledge management, what we are doing is we're facilitating the flow of knowledge from people to other people. We are facilitating the flow of knowledge from people to organizations. Good? Good? Okay. So that's knowledge and knowledge management. So now we know what we're talking about. So you're going to see it's going to kind of resonate in terms of the challenges we face and the approach we're taking. So let me start first with the actors and the efforts in knowledge management in the international development sector. Again, trying to keep us from the organizational challenge to the sector and the system challenge. The main actors are global institutions, in particular the UN development system and the World Bank have been leaders in the knowledge management space in the sector since the late 90s. And in fact, when I was doing my reading to make sure that I was up on the history, I realized I actually was there when the World Bank convened the UN development system and all of its World Bank colleagues from different countries to the World Bank headquarters in DC. And I actually remember I was there when they announced their commitment to be a knowledge broker for international development globally. They said they have so much knowledge from the research they produced, their relationship with country governments, their, again, the reach that they had, plus their partnership with the UN system. And they said, we're a natural knowledge broker to connect us all to end poverty. And so there's a really rich history that should be read, and I will share it afterwards as part of this talk, around the efforts of the UN system and the World Bank to try and facilitate knowledge sharing across the sector. A couple of really notable things that I think were really powerful examples of what we're trying to do is the UN Development Program ended up designing, actually starting to put forward professional knowledge networks in the UN system in the late 90s and early 2000s. And all they were doing was through what essentially is a Facebook that they built proprietary in the UN Development Program. They created their own proprietary social networking software. They launched it within the UN system, and they had unbelievable, off-the-chart success in the adoption of this tool for people in the UN system to find, connect, and collaborate with each other. This is in the late 90s and early 2000s. Hugely successful. The second thing that the UN did that was very, very successful was the launch of something they called the Solutions Exchange. Has anybody ever heard of the Solutions Exchange? Haha. The Solutions Exchange was taking that knowledge hub, knowledge network program that they developed in the UNDP, and they repurposed it in South Asia and in particularly India. And what they did was they convened professional networks of Indian actors who are working on social development. And what they did was just through a simple email, any of these professionals could email in a question, and they would facilitate, the UN country team would facilitate getting answers back into the system to help people working within that sector in India, working on policy challenges, to actually find, connect, and collaborate with each other to get information. Really interesting initiative, really low tech, and again, really, really very popular and highly adopted. I remember it so well and thinking, this is on email with a facilitator, hugely successful. And so there are these examples in the history of the global institutions of real innovation and success in trying to get cross-sector, cross-system collaboration and sharing knowledge. In the middle is the private sector. The private sector is a huge actor right now in terms of creating conditions for knowledge exchange. And they're really, really interested in helping the international development sector actually break through with new ways to use technology in particular to leverage knowledge. But this actor is way ahead. I think we all know McKinsey. Have we read the book lately about McKinsey and how it's this powerful, powerful, huge network of consultants, and they have unlocked the profit value equation for knowledge sharing within the McKinsey organization at scale. And so it's really knowledge that is what is making that global organization its money. So they are an actor, not just McKinsey, but the private sector is a real actor in this space right now because they have figured out the power of knowledge for profit line. And so they're also reaching out to us in the international development sector to try and help us innovate in the use of technology and new ways of unlocking knowledge sharing. And then, of course, the third major actor in this space is academia. And we have to acknowledge where the profit motive for corporations has been a big driver. Academia is driving the idea that we should be having open data sharing, open knowledge sharing, open science. This is driving the efforts to create a more open system of knowledge exchange. So there's been so many different examples of this coming out of different academic institutions trying to facilitate this. And again, really great efforts. And what I will say, across all of these actors, with the exception of the private sector that's figured it out for itself, but hasn't figured out how to get us to do it, for all of these actors that have been trying to do this in the international development sector, one thing we can say, and please challenge me this when we get to the end of the conversation, to the talk, challenge me on this, but I would say none of these efforts has succeeded in achieving the type of scale and impact that is their ambition. The global institutions have not succeeded. Most of the efforts I just talked about no longer exist. They just literally don't exist anymore. They hit a certain point of scale, but then that was it. They were not sustained. In terms of academia, I think there's a lot of pride, dataverse, right? Now, how many times did I hear about dataverse in a conference I was at last week? Really exciting initiatives around open data, but they are really kind of niche. They're not actually aggregating to the way that their ambition is to bring us all together in a scaled, sustained knowledge exchange. So my question is, why aren't we getting this right? Like, what is behind this? Why can't we scale? Why can't we sustain an initiative around knowledge management, knowledge sharing, facilitation of knowledge flow at scale in international development? What are the things that are getting in our way? So this is to be provocative, and I'd like us to talk about this. So I'm just teeing this up. I think the first thing we should talk about is legitimacy. What do I mean by that? What is the legitimacy? This is the question I think we need to be asking ourselves more explicitly. What is the legitimacy of the actors that are coming to help us facilitate our knowledge flows? What is their legitimacy? What are their core interests? Are they legitimate to house our knowledge, facilitate the flow of knowledge, and to convene us? Do we ask that question enough? They may have an interest, but are they legitimate? So, oh, sorry, I thought I was going to do a little animation. So let me just give again the legitimacy of the global institutions I just spoke about. The UN system, the World Bank. Back in 1999, that's the first thing we should have been talking about. Are they legitimate actors to facilitate our knowledge flow in this sector? Because their interests and their obligations are, if you really, doesn't take much to peel it away, is not to people, it is to the host governments that they are associated with. And the knowledge we are exchanging is not an apolitical thing. It is a political thing that can actually be used or misused in that setting. So I think there's something around the legitimacy of the global institutions that would like to do this for the sector, but I think we should be fundamentally starting to talk about the legitimacy of those actors to do it. Take the private sector. The private sector has, as I said in the beginning, so much to bring to us. They have innovated so rapidly to harness knowledge within their institutions. They have technologies, they have practices, they have culture initiatives that kind of create the conditions that allow you to share knowledge for them at scale within their institutions. Tens of thousands of people across the globe. Great example. But are they a legitimate actor to help us or to host any form of knowledge exchange where we know knowledge, that the profit motive around sharing knowledge and data is there? So what is the legitimacy of the private sector to be helping us in this? And what are the rules of engagement of the private sector to help us with this? And then finally, for academia, I think academia has legitimacy, right? And an interest and a legitimacy to create something that potentially could be at scale for us. And then I would ask, but does academia have the credibility to do it? Because academia is as siloed and competitive with the knowledge that's being exchanged as any other type of institution such as ours in the international development sector. And there's a question of credibility of whether academia can actually do this, because academia can't easily do it for itself. So I'll stop there. I think we should be asking these questions about the actors and how this may be getting in the way of what our ambition is. Secondly, I think the other second challenge that we're facing is the core question of equity. And this, again, is something that we don't talk about enough, which is that as we're building knowledge exchanges, knowledge sharing platforms, knowledge initiatives, who do we respect as those who know? Who holds the knowledge? Whose knowledge are we valuing in that system? And I just always say, who knows? Because knowledge is people and what people know. So in a knowledge system, who are we valuing that knows, or who are we not valuing that knows, and therefore creating unnecessary exclusions of people who have knowledge that can facilitate greater knowledge exchange within the sector. So who knows? And then secondly, who's the target of the learning? So if you do have a healthy exchange of knowledge, is it an extractive model, which we're building all over the world a lot of times, where it's an extraction, knowledge exchange for the purposes of extracting that knowledge for other purposes? Or are we actually creating knowledge exchange with the idea of people who are closest to impact and influencing policy is at the heart of that exchange? So equity is a question in terms of our ability to scale. Are we creating the right conditions for people to feel they are part of that knowledge exchange and what they know is valued, and that what knowledge is exchanged is actually there for them to do something with? And then finally, leadership, which may be the biggest challenge we face. I think the UN's and the global institutions experiments in this, and I think even our own academic institutions and international NGOs are facing this challenge. This may be one of the biggest challenges. The leadership challenge of actually starting an initiative with the ability to scale and sustain that initiative with the focus of leadership to do so. Most of the UN system initiatives have failed, often because the leader that created the initiative left. It wasn't built to sustain beyond an individual leader creating the conditions for it to be there. So we have a culture challenge in terms of building knowledge management systems in the sector, in that most leadership is not actually committed to creating a lasting, sustainable system of knowledge exchange that would last beyond that leader. And then secondly, I think we have a challenge with leadership, and that leadership just simply doesn't understand what knowledge is, and they simply don't know what knowledge management is. Many leadership environments, it just distills down to an intranet. It comes down to an intranet. It comes down to some technology. They often think of it less about people's exchange of knowledge and more about data and information systems to be engineered. So we have also a challenge, and I'm living it today at Save the Children, with leaders understanding the value of creating a people-centered knowledge process versus building systems just to house more data and information. Fair? So we have to talk about that. What is the leadership we need to lead on such an initiative? All right, now, this is where you're going to have to watch me for time, because this is where I'm living every day. How do we create new approaches to this that actually start to move the needle? And how do we think about building knowledge management systems that will last for the future and that are equitable and legitimate? But I'm going to stay here at a very high level. I really just want to share with you how we're approaching it today at Save the Children, if that's okay. So I'm going to now just go at Save the Children. We are already thinking about, it's not knowledge management for Save the Children. This is what I should do, right? This is what INGOs do. This is what all centers do. We always think about ourselves, right? We navel gaze. It's all about us. We're actually trying to conceive a knowledge management practice and initiative that actually starts to break through with the entire sector. And what's that sector? The child rights sector. The child rights sector. We would like to be creating a knowledge sharing exchange that makes it possible for all actors working in the child rights sector to find, connect, and collaborate with each other and share their knowledge. So we're approaching it with this very clear approach that goes from left to right. We start with people, we understand their process, and then we talk about technology. So I'm going to talk about those three things. So first of all, people. So what we're doing right now today is we are starting our knowledge management initiative first by conducting user experience and human-centered design research. That's where we're starting. Why we're starting there is because people are at the heart of knowledge and knowledge sharing. So we've basically been doing UX, user experience research to better understand the archetypal, these are archetypal actors that are, or users or participants in a knowledge system. So we've built out personas around people who contribute knowledge, researchers, people who are building guidelines or synthesizing knowledge and producing new knowledge. They're people who are contributing knowledge into the system. And so we want to understand who is this person and what are they trying to achieve? What is their motivation? Where are they sitting? What is the benefit of contributing knowledge into the system? Then we've been focusing on a second user persona, which is the curator, the person or people who actually, and they're all over the place, where there's a lot of knowledge being produced in a system on a topic, say gender-based violence, talk about children's health, and they are actively curating that knowledge within the system so that we all have access to the best knowledge, and also they are helping us push that knowledge out into the system. So your contributor is coming into a curator, and who is that person? What are they trying to achieve with curation, and how are they doing that job? What are the tools they use? And then the third persona is the collector. And there are a lot of collectors. So that actually is a big archetype for many different roles. But what we focused on in our research is we wanted to focus specifically on the collector who is using knowledge to influence policy. And so we're going deep into understanding that person, their persona, how they're finding knowledge, how they're using knowledge, so we can start to build a knowledge sharing system around those people and what they're trying to achieve, what their pain points are, what their needs are, and what their vision is for if they were successful in that role, what would they be achieving? So we're starting with people. Second thing is we're trying to understand process. So people and understanding what they would like to do is still not enough to understand how to facilitate the flow of knowledge for those people. So again, saying knowledge management is an engineering challenge, it's a flow challenge, right? How do you get people to connect with the knowledge that's out there in the system? We're starting to map the current state flow of people and their journey with knowledge today. So we're actively documenting what people's practices are to find knowledge, to contribute knowledge, to collect knowledge. So we get their current state so that we can start to build out with them, what does the future state look like? And what are the enablers, technical or non-technical enablers to help them do that? So we're doing a lot of process mapping, and they call it business process mapping, but it's just process mapping, right? Yeah, I call it journey mapping, because again, it's not about efficiency, it's actually about effectiveness. So we're doing journey mapping of these personas to better map, like, and a journey for a person in global health is really different from the person working on GBV, which is really different from the person working on climate, right? Very different where they're going, what they're doing. We're trying to map all of that. And then we're getting to technology. So technology, instead of knowledge management being more like building the next management information system, knowledge management and technology is the facilitator, enabler of knowledge flows. So we don't know what the technology answer is. We're trying to figure out that. And in most cases, it's multiple technologies. In most cases, when we map the flow of knowledge and a person's journey to find, connect, curate knowledge, we learn that they're using many different systems. There is no one system they're using. There's no one technology. So we want to see all the technologies and start focusing on where we are today with technology to improve the flow. What can we do with technology that enables that flow? And the first thing we're focusing on is integration. We think the number one thing that we should be doing today and focusing on with technology is not building the next proprietary system or paying for the next really expensive AWS, blah, blah, blah. We think we should be looking at the current ecosystem and start to ensure that there are integrations between systems where they can exist. Whether it's a website where basically we have partners who are on the website and they're putting all their knowledge there, can we get that knowledge to flow back into us? Where we're putting knowledge in our repository, can we get it appropriately to flow to a website where we want to share it, to a database, a repository? But we want to start with integration, because technology today, most technologies that are not proprietary, built properly in a modern technological design, have the ability to integrate. And so we're focused on integration. All right, second thing, we're focused on computation. I know, so see, I could just talk about this, Fatima. We talk about computation. What is computation giving us? Actually, technology has evolved today to allow us to put videos, PDFs, pictures, audio files. It's allowing us to put all types of structured and unstructured data and knowledge into a common data layer. I'll call it a data layer, and use computation to actually unpack all those different forms of explicit knowledge to make them understandable and more equal in terms of our ability to extract new knowledge and to work with the knowledge that's stuck into those systems. So I don't know about you, but my organization's repository of knowledge has 80-page evaluations. It has 100-page guidelines. It has tons of video of people in practice, in the field. We can use computation, modern emerging technologies today, to start to unpack that so we can get access to that knowledge that's locked into all these different data sources or knowledge sources. So computation, and I actually have a drawing of this that I was not going to do today, but I would love to do it at some point. And then finally, AI and machine learning. If we can start to make these connections, unpack what's locked in documents, we can then start to point machine learning, natural language processing at those knowledge sources and start to query that knowledge. That makes it more accessible to people's questions. Right now, today, this is what we just did a grant on this, which is why I'm so excited about it, because right now, the best we can do when we have a question about something around our knowledge base, the best we can do, sorry, is this going to go on the website? But the best we can do is we can find maybe 10, 20, 25 documents. And then we get a person and they're working 6 weeks, most likely. That's still too short, probably a couple of months, to try and synthesize that knowledge and validate what those 10 documents were saying. We believe with AI and machine learning, with integration and with computation, you can actually ask that same question of thousands of documents in minutes and seconds. Properly trained, you can go from months, right, hours, to minutes to ask those questions. And I think that's really the power of technology, is that we can actually start to the point of equity, ensure more sources of knowledge are seen and valued in the system. And that it sounds so scary, but machine learning actually may unlock our ability to see more than we see today, and to hear more voices and to hear more perspectives around what's happening, what's working, and what's not working. Good. That's my geek on why I'm in the technology division right now, because this is super exciting. And this is really, again, But the danger is we don't want to start with technology, even though it's super exciting. We can't do that if we don't start with people. And if we don't start understanding people, how they're working, and how all of this facilitates what they need, not what we need academically or just because we can. All right, I was a little bit over, but that's the kind of overview, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions to the challenge that I've presented today. So thank you. Yes.
You've talked about the legitimacy of the users of the institutions. And when we talk about utilizing technology like AI, machine learning, I think the legitimacy issue is going to get amplified when we use AI because it's more difficult to judge the legitimacy of the learning of the software. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know your name, sorry. I didn't know if you introduced yourself or told us where you come from. This is your space. Yeah, quickly, yeah, because we have
my name is Kanwal and I'm doing my master's from HKS,
Okay,
MCMTA student.
Thank you. Oh, so if I can respond really quickly. So thank you. I think when I went and prepared for this, I've actually been mostly writing about legitimacy because of data and data sharing. And that's what got me to start to write about it and start speaking about it. I think there's just because we're at an institution of learning, there's a dearth of writing about this. I really struggle to see people writing about this enough because we talk about ethics and all this, but I do think that we should be really unpacking legitimacy of actors and starting to put better rules and constraints because we do need to work with the private sector as well. We can't not work with the private sector. I think we thought we could. We can't, but I think we can put better rules of engagement. And I think we can be making more demands on them to change what they're doing and improve what they're doing because they're partnering with us in this sector. It's going to be tough. I'm trying that a little bit with AWS. They just want to get Ubers to, ferry refugees around. And I said, no, that's a business challenge. We have a different challenge here. So can we partner with you on AI machine learning for you to learn about how we can appropriately use this technology in our sector? I think that's our challenge with the private sector. Governments and the UN system and the World Bank, that's the elephant in the room. Those organizations, those institutions, I hear private sector actors saying to me, we recognize, Microsoft in particular, we recognize the limits of our legitimacy here. They can say that. I never hear that from the UN system, and I never hear that from the World Bank. So if I can say, and I'm listening year after year, I have yet to hear them name that. I think we need to start writing about it and make sure that they understand that there's a limit to their legitimacy in this space and to recognize that. Jamil.
Hi, my name is Khalil.
Oh, Khalil, sorry, Khalil.
So my question is actually on the inequities in knowledge sharing, particularly at the level of the multilateral organizations and member states, and in particular resource-constrained states. So you talk about the UN actually do work within the UN system right now. I had one of their research units within two of the agencies. And one of the issues that we have is we bring together all of these actors and we produce a substantial amount of research. And we've included both the public and the private sector, right? The issue is that we have all of this knowledge that has been created and then it gets lost in bureaucratic processes, right? So we're unable to get it implemented in member states, but the private sector, so private actors can actually take it and commercialize it immediately, right? And so is there an example of, or how have you thought about how we could actually get this knowledge disseminated to those countries or in those settings where perhaps they don't have, they don't even have the basic infrastructure to focus on AI and machine learning or computation centers? How do we get them to actually use this?
Yeah, I love it. But I think this is where this is where we start. I do believe that knowledge, we said knowledge flows. and we don't have a system that's flowing. So I applaud the institutions for generating all that research. And I can tell you from being in an organization, it's not flowing. It's just not flowing. And we're not, and we could be doing something to facilitate that still recognizes that is the knowledge of those institutions. But if that knowledge is really relevant to, again, a movement of child rights activists and organizations to be doing better, then can we start facilitating that flow? And again, I don't want to be precious about this. The flow, we may decide that the flow is into those organizations. Maybe we want to say, but we have to look at the processes, what people are trying to achieve, and then build those integrations around them. I think that's real exciting future stuff, but that's not right now. I see a lot of experimentation here, super exciting, but that's not in the next 5 years, really. But this could be in the next 2 years. Okay.
Hi, my name is Susana. My question also is related with inequality. Sometimes the data produced in the north and go to the south. How to create and tackle that the south produce their own data and have their own information and be equal? Because I seen that we only create an increase in the digital divide in these solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think that the key is, and again, going back to the right, putting people at the center could potentially unlock some of that. Again, starting to really challenge who knows and who's the target of learning. I think our institutions, it is the donor. So it makes us also sometimes illegitimate as well to be doing this work, because we have yet to successfully put the program practitioners and the partner network. I mean, we talk about localization, but really, if we were to get this right, wouldn't local actors be the primary source of who knows and who's the target for learning? So I think if we can unlock the people piece of this and truly try and build a system that works for that flow within that ecosystem, and then there are other uses of it that are going to come out, I think that's part of our challenge here. But when we go straight to technology, it generally is designed to meet the needs of who's, kind of paying the bills, basically, as opposed to creating that knowledge sharing ecosystem. So I think getting the people equation into this more would start to help. The same?
This is more in the context of also involving technology. So you mentioned that you're focusing on creating a knowledge sharing platform. Even with the best of intentions, a lot of the knowledge we have accumulated so far tends to be racist, prejudiced, stereotypical. So as we bring it into a system and as we unleash AI on it, what are our efforts to make sure that this is not garbage that we are feeding into ML? Like, as you create this system, what are your, see that you have put in curators, but like, what are those safeguards that ensure that, clean data is going in so that we can get clean insights?
So my understanding of this, I'm sorry, I didn't keep it.
Sorry, my name is Nandita.
Okay, great. And I think that's where this comes in. That's now where computation is coming in. Computation is helping us clean. That is essentially what it's doing. It's unpacking the materials and it's cleaning it. Again, I'm even in an experimentation phase right now on this, but my understanding is that it can help flag. Computation helps flag what potentially is bad data, and it kicks it back to the humans to look at that before it gets into the system. So you're right. And I'm not saying, when I say I'm not creating a platform, I just want to say we're trying to create flow. And so we are adopting some platforms as already scaled. And that if we could connect the pipes, we could connect of people and their knowledge, we could scale. So it is true. It's not like it's agnostic. We're making some choices. But to this point, one of the choices we're making is to adopt platforms that already anybody can bring data, can share their knowledge. Local actors, member organizations, whatever, anybody can share their knowledge. An individual researcher could share their knowledge. We don't have barriers to people in this child's rights platform to share their knowledge. That's where computation is going to be so important. We need some way. Humans aren't going to be able to do that. We're going to need some technologically enhanced way to identify exactly what you're talking about. What is some potentially bad data, and it gets looked at by a person and it gets kicked out. Yeah, and cat videos, they'll get kicked out too.
Hi, my name's Elena again. Thank you so much for your discussion. I think my question comes to when we're thinking about local actors, that requires people relationships. So I guess what's your advice when it comes to building relationships with local actors so that we're able to harness that local knowledge? But then once that knowledge is, created, we have that, how do we ensure that it's not lost in the scalability of the integration of that knowledge itself when there's so many other actors in that space that currently have certain value attached to their knowledge that perhaps a local actor does not?
Yeah, I think there's something here that we need to think about, which is the kind of the rules of engagement. It feels like there needs to be, and I'm again mostly talking about this in the data space right now, because we've been talking similarly about a clearinghouse of data. That's why I was saying Dataverse and all of these things are coming up and we're like, is it really adding up? So we've been talking about this with data, and we've been talking about what are the rules of engagement or the terms of the exchange that should become more explicit. Because again, knowledge is, we don't want people to monetize our knowledge, which is just what Khalil said. They're monetizing our knowledge, like, right? That's not okay. That's not the intention. So the share, we don't want them to monetize it. We don't want them to misuse it, right? And we need to recognize knowledge is not an apolitical thing. It's a political thing in our sector. So, so we've been talking about what is the nature of the exchange so that there can be these private gardens of collaboration around knowledge that is where you own your knowledge, right? And then it's what are the rules by which you're sharing it? And I think the way I've been trying to think about this is it's almost like a barter system, as opposed to I mean, you need some monetization to make sure the thing is sustained, but could we create some sort of a barter system? If you contribute your knowledge appropriately, you're able to actually get something out of that exchange through higher level aggregation. But I'm putting the local actors in that, as opposed to this being like, we're gonna like find the silver bullet. It's actually AI and machine learning for the community of actors that have contributed their knowledge into a broader system. And we're negotiating a terms of agreement that they get to pull, they get to point their algorithms at it to try and pull knowledge out for themselves. I think we have to figure out a new system and rules of exchange that allows them to keep and the terms of their sharing are really well understood. Because again, the context of different countries is so different that we have to be super careful about just assuming that all knowledge should be shared into a global system. We can't assume that that's the right thing to do. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I had no idea that Save the Children was working on that, and it's really thrilling in a way. Going back to the local context, because you're doing all of this with the objective of, influencing and informing policy making. And I think what you just mentioned about local context is really important. So I'm just struggling to see how that will be integrated in your knowledge management. How can you ensure that at the end, I don't remember how the actor is called, whoever will be using the data, found the knowledge, how can they still be very mindful of the locality of the knowledge when using it for their own policy making?
Right, because you're saying you're talking about the collector.
The collector, yeah.
Yeah. How do we know that they're?
Is it something that's your responsibility, quote unquote, as developing this knowledge management? Is it the collector's responsibility? But if it is yours, how do you keep that? How do you put it in?
What an interesting question. Well, so first I'll give you my first reaction to the question, which is to tell you that what we learned about the collector, which scares me more than misuse of knowledge in the system, is that collectors are influencing where we are not sure what knowledge they're using. They don't know where to find the knowledge. They don't know where to find the knowledge and information. That's actually what we found. That terrified me. Fatima writes a lot about, the lowest common denominator way that a lot of policy advocates are working. They're only just asking for more money. It's so true. They go in, they just have an ask, and they'll cobble whatever together to get the ask. More in the farm bill, more in the, foreign aid, et cetera. I think their hands are tied right now. They actually don't have access to knowledge. I think that's the bigger problem. So they're not doing higher level advocacy and influence right now. It's very anecdotal. It's not based on solid research and evidence. I think let's solve that first. And then I think let's see how that impacts their ability to do higher level influence and on policy. Yeah. So I hope that was a hedgy one. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, online.
Sorry about that. We have some questions from the online attendees. I don't know that we'll have time to get to all of them. I'll pass them along. Some of them are topics that you've touched on at least a little already, but I did want to share. Of course, relaying thanks for the presentation. With the help of these two renowned institutions, the UN and World Bank, why knowledgeable experts are still not reaching the goals of sustainable international development? What are the factors and/or barriers in meeting the goals in poverty eradication under developed and developing countries? Of what value is knowledge that can be accessed by the people that need it most? Do you see this as a challenge? How diverse is the knowledge? Knowledge in some continents, is that receiving a voice? How do we harness the knowledge from people from their own perspective? Again, thanks. The process flow of mouth-to-mouth information and data collection exchange that you discussed, how do you open up your market for your credited knowledge? Sorry, that was a lot to throw at you as numerous questions. And again, I think you've touched on several of these.
I think Khalil actually answered one of them. I was laughing. It was the first one you answered. But yeah, I think we've covered all of those. Is there anything else that is coming up? Yeah. Oh.
Also, this is gonna have to be the last question. Sorry.
Oh.
My name is Romita. Apologies about missing the first part and in case you covered it, but I'd just love to know that as you built out the knowledge management system in your organizations, what were some of the surprises that you found along the way, and any examples that you have for how the knowledge that these platforms have generated translated into successes on the ground level for the practitioner? So we'd just love to hear any examples that you might have.
Well, thank you, Romita, and thank you for saying that. You might have missed the beginning part of it. So one of the key things in the beginning was to say it's not about systems and platforms and technology. When I talk about knowledge, we're talking about people and the flow of people's knowledge, both what's in their head and what's on paper in an ecosystem of knowledge sharing. So knowledge management, I said at the beginning, is kind of a misnomer because it ends up being translated into something like management information systems and intranets and other forms of technology. And I'm trying to place technology as more of an enabler and facilitator of knowledge flow. And so the surprises really, I have to say, came when we did human-centered design and UX research and realizing, I think we should be doing so much more of this, because realizing how much the fragmented ecosystem of knowledge in our sector is really challenging for people to understand and feel that they can get a grasp on the latest information and knowledge in their area. So the biggest, surprise, it maybe was actually validating something that we thought was happening, which is that people are not actually using technologies and platforms and repositories in the way we would expect them to. They just aren't. They're emailing each other. They're on WhatsApp crowdsourcing. They're asking, even within their own institution, they're not going to the institutional knowledge base to find the seminal work in 1997 on blah, blah, blah. They're going to people they knew back in 1997 to see if anybody has it on their hard drive. That's the shocking reality of what can be happening right now. And I don't want to in any way diminish the organization I'm in, because the organization is full of unbelievable knowledge. Like, we are the premier organization around child rights, child protection. I mean, I could list it, right? Child health, this is people, this is what they do all day. This is their passion for, decades. And we can't make that flow. And we can't make that flow with your knowledge. And that's what's broken. Thank you. Good. Okay. Leila, good. You're the. Oh, okay.
Well, first, join me in thanking Bridget, please, for this phenomenal presentation. So I wanted to say a quick word. So for those that don't know me, I'm Fatima Sumar. I'm the Executive Director for the Center of International Development. And with Bridget's consent, we're actually going to pilot something new starting today, and I'm going to put it on your radars. And if it works, we'll keep building this out. But we're going to launch at CID Career Conversations, because I had a thought that when we bring in these amazing practitioners who are on the front lines, who have such rich careers, and while we have them here on campus, we should try to connect them with students in real time. So Bridget has kindly agreed. She's holding office hours this afternoon over at CID. I know some of you have already signed up for those office hours. If you haven't, but you want to still follow up with her, it could be about a career conversation about the incredible work she's done, others in her networks as you're thinking about internships, jobs, or future pathways. I know Bridget will be kind enough to share her email with all of you for those who are interested. November 18th, we'll be having Sonal Shah, who's currently at United Way, but she's the incoming CEO of the Texas Tribune, which is one of the major newspapers out there. And she's also kindly agreed to also, following her talk, hold career chats. And Sonal's been in every single international space you could imagine. When you Google her, you'll see how lucky and how excited we are to have someone of her caliber also join and offer career advice as well. So first, I just wanted to say a huge thanks to Bridget, because you are also going to kick off our career conversations here at CID. Thanks to those of you that already signed up, and for those of you that couldn't make it this afternoon but want to follow up, there are definitely ways to connect as well. So thanks for being our signature kickoff. Thank you, Bridget, for joining us on this lovely Friday afternoon here in Cambridge. And we look forward to seeing all of you on November 18th. Leila, thank you for bringing us all together. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.